Wow. Oh my gosh. Wait till Colleen sees this little pup.
Addie, say hi to Steve. Hello.
Oh my God.
Eventually, we're going to teach him to say hello, like a Seinfeld, hello, and shake hands. But she's about 12 weeks old, and it's not chewed any furniture yet, and it's not chewed up any slippers or shoes yet. She might, she will. I will love her despite that.
Exactly.
But she's already kind of comes when you call and goes and pees outside, so she's doing pretty well.
I'll tell you what, they're smartest dogs on the planet, in my view. Look at that, Addie. We love you, Addie. Look at her.
All right, there you go.
Welcome to the Embracing Brokenness podcast, where our goal is to engage with all of those willing to venture deeper into their transformational journey with Christ. Here's your host and co-founder of Embracing Brokenness Ministries, Steve Adams.
Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Embracing Brokenness podcast. I'm your host, Steve Adams, and I have a special guest for you today. You will really enjoy my interview with Jay Payleitner. Jay spent a decade in major market advertising, learning how people think and doing some fun work, as he puts it. But God called him into Christian media, and he became an almost too busy freelance producer. For more than a decade, Jay scripted and produced Josh McDowell Radio, Today's Father, Jesus Freaks Radio with Toby Mack and Michael Tate, Project Angel Tree with Chuck Colson, and thousands of hours of radio that aired across the country and beyond. Jay is a longtime affiliate with the National Center for Fathering and nationally known motivational speaker for Iron Sharpens Iron. Marriage conferences, men's retreats, women's events, writers' conferences, which is actually when I first came in contact with Jay, and all kinds of weekend services that he gets himself into. So Jay also sold more than, this is impressive, 500,000 books, including the best-selling 52 Things Kids Need from a Dad, The Jesus Dare, and What If God Wrote Your Bucket List. I think 39 books in all. Pretty impressive. His latest and perhaps most important release is, at least from my perspective, Girl Dad, because I'm a girl dad. Okay. He has 8 grandkids, and Jay and his bride, Rita, are realizing the critical nature of loving on and engaging with and laughing alongside the next generation. Well put, Jay. Jay's books have been translated into French and German and Spanish and Italian, Afrikaans, Indonesian, Slovenian, Polish, and Russian. He's been a guest multiple times on The Harvest Show, 100 Huntley Street, Moody Radio, Building Relationships with Gary Chapman, Cornerstone TV, and Focus on the Family. Many of you are familiar with them. During the pandemic, Jay co-founded benevolent think tank with 8 fellow altruistic and creative partners. Check that out if you can. Jay and his high school sweetheart, Rita, live in the Chicago area where they've raised 5 great kids, loved on 10 foster babies, and are cherishing grandparenthood. That's awesome. So without further ado, folks, welcome Jay Payleitner. Well, greetings, everyone. You're in for a treat today. I have Jay Payleitner with me on today's podcast. Welcome, Jay. Great to have you with us.
Well, Steve, you know what? We've been talking about this for a while. What a delight to hang out with you. I hope it's a wonderful 12-hour session to cover everything we want to cover.
We probably...
Well, we're going to go maybe 40 minutes, 45, something like that?
Probably. Do you think we might need 15 episodes? I'm not sure. It could be.
Okay.
So quick story. For our audience, we met the week of the 4th of July. Actually, on the beach at the Jersey Shore. Now, I'm not sure where you exactly were when I was watching the surf under a beach umbrella. I looked at an email on my phone from you, and it was titled The Circle Game.
Oh, yeah,
and I
for sure.
Loved it. I immediately related because the carousel you mentioned, the merry-go-round there briefly, that's on almost every boardwalk on the Jersey Shore, which is what I remember as a kid. And I thought, this is so cool. And then when I read it, which our listeners, our audience are going to have to go find it. We reposted it. But I was so I loved it well enough to at least to say, hey, Jay, do you mind if we repost this? And your response was classic. It was great. I loved it. You said, please do repost anywhere, anytime. just spell my name right. You've had that problem a few times.
You think so? Yeah. I'm not going to give away anything, but it's a short little quip, the circle game, and it's charming and engaging, and it makes you smile. Then it hits you in the gut at the end, and then we'll leave it at that.
It does.
Dads.
And so find it on, you probably get it at jpayleitner.com somewhere, but you definitely can find it on our memo. So
yeah, it's on my blog post, on my website, jpayleitner.com. How's that for hard sells? jpayleitner.com. So spell it right. Make sure you spell it right.
Please do. Yeah. And it'll be in the show notes. So you guys will all figure it out. That'll be a good thing. So in your expanded bio, you wrote this, and I'm going to give you a chance just to respond to what you said. I love this, in a description of yourself, assuming you wrote it, which I'm sure you did. Beyond income generating activity, Jay has done just about anything to stay close to his kids and give back to the community, serving as in wrestling, baseball, softball coach, Awana director, Booster Club president, science fair chaperone, Salvation Army advisory board, church volunteer, including nursery duty. I love that. Kids World speaker, drama coach, youth counselor, middle school van driver. That's another good one.
Yeah.
School volunteer, including rock and read, picnic games leader, fundraising chairman, video producer, sound tech, and my favorite, room mom.
Yeah.
Tell me about what's your favorite?
Well, it might be Rock and Read.
Okay.
Which we bought a house, and they built the great, because we knew they're building the grade school just a block away. It was a great season of life. Mm-hmm. And Rock and Read was our kindergarten teacher. Put a rocking chair outside the little alcove outside the kindergarten room. And once a week for the whole year, I think I came and read for just maybe half an hour. We pulled out one kid at a time.
No way.
Because there's a sense that, I'm choking up thinking about it, there's a sense that some kids don't get read to. I mean, most kids do. In my little community, western suburbs of Chicago, most kids get read to during the course of a week. Not bedtime stories every night, but she knew, the teacher, brilliant, knew that there were some kids who never got read to out loud. And so I said, I can do that. I was working out of my home, so it gets me up in the morning. It was early, like from 8 to 9 o'clock, and you pull out one kid at a time, and sometimes it's your own kid. But the best was October. I think one of my days fell on Halloween, and I came in my Superman costume that my wife had secretly made for me. This is another longer story, but my third grader wanted to be Superman. So she made a Superman costume for him. At the same time, they secretly made a Superman costume for Dad. So I went as Superman Rock and Read. That was the best. And Room Mom is a great thing too.
Yeah.
Again, it's probably more likely now, but I'm talking 20 years ago now, 30 years ago now, when my kids were in second grade. When a dad shows up, when a dad shows up at a grade school, it's a memorable thing.
Absolutely.
Kids are proud. Yeah. Yeah. So
well, and you're a family guy. Look at everything that you've written. And by the way, folks, you could spend the next couple of years reading all of Jay's books, which are nearing 40 now. So just in case you were wondering, and we're going to talk about a couple of them, maybe even a few today, but it is so obvious, your love for family and your faith, obviously, ahead of all. And so I would love if you would be willing to go back in time a little bit and take us through sort of the earlier years. I mean, you were in advertising, right? Initially. Well, I mean, you can go back further than that if you like, because you have a story, everybody does, a spiritual journey of how you came to know the Lord. So we'd love to hear that. But then also you made this kind of a big move out of the secular into what I would call ministry. Of course, it's all ministry as believers, anything we do. So take us back, give us a little bit of the landscape in your life from what happened early on and through where we are today, if you don't mind doing that.
Yeah, I will see if I can give you the medium length version of all that.
Yes, that's fine.
Because it does weave in and out our careers, especially for men, women too now these days, of course, but weaves in and out our faith and what's important to us and priorities and getting socked in the face and wins and losses. I grew up Catholic, and ex-Catholics, former Catholics make great evangelicals, although that term doesn't even, I hate that term, these evangelicals. I don't want to be labeled, don't label me.
Yeah, right.
A Bible believing Christian, authentic Christian, we'll call it. But I grew up Catholic, and I missed Mass probably twice between the time I was 7 years old and 25, literally, maybe twice, 2 Sundays. And that's pretty good practice, and I came to Christ to understanding of grace and sin and the need for a Savior as a Catholic. We had a little pocket of again, authentic, true, grace-filled Catholics in our big local parish, and we were part of that. And then we just realized we needed better teaching, and there was some controversy. One teacher told our kids in school that Noah's Ark was a total fairy tale. It's like, well, you can't do that, Yeah. And rather than argue, we just kind of quietly said, you know what, we're going to go to the big non-denominational church in the edge of town. Non-threatening. We're not going to suddenly be Baptist. We're not, although We're going to a Baptist church now. we're not suddenly going to be, some other. But let me take you to the moment when I received Christ as my Savior. Our youth pastor at the Catholic Church, who was he got his master's degree from Wheaton College. Wow. That bastion of biblical teaching in Wheaton, Illinois. He got his master's degree there and was a true authentic Catholic. And he and I were good buddies. And we were lifting weight. We lifted weights, 3 times a day in the church basement, 3 times a week. When I was in my mid-20s, and he laid the groundwork for this, but he showed a video of, and maybe some of your older listeners and viewers will remember this, Steve, about it was a little fictional thing of some teenagers that trashed the studio of a puppet maker. I don't know. It's one of those bad, cheesy, terrible videos from the 80s, I guess.
Okay.
And as a punishment, they went before the court, and the puppet master said, you know what? Don't send him to jail. Don't send him to juvie. Have him spend the summer with me. And I'm telling the story too long here, but the punchline was each one of these kids, these nasty, terrible teenage kids, went out to this, seemed in my puny mind, to go out and look up at the stars and say, I give my life to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Wow. And I said, well, that's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, just saying a few words doesn't mean anything. At this point, I understood sin and grace and such, which really, in my experience, they didn't teach too much about sin and grace in the Catholic Church back in those days, because they had come full circle and such. I'm not sure what they're doing now. Okay. I said, well, that's easy. So I walked outside and I looked up in the stars. I was going to say and I couldn't say it because I knew it was a decision of both the mind and the heart. It had to go together at that moment. So I gave it a few more days and really thought it through. I don't remember. I may have talked it out with Frank, my buddy, and then I finally did go out because I was a youth volunteer. I had a dozen teenage kids in my living room on Wednesday nights. You know how that is. Mm-hmm. And I went out after those kids left my house in an October evening, and I said, I understood, and I made that decision. My life has never been the same since. And boy, the changes since then, boy, it just rock and rolls quick. How God uses that decision. I'm going too long. I haven't let you interject, but real quick, my wife was going on her same journey at the same time, and years later, we realized that it was within weeks of each other that we both separately accepted Christ as our Savior.
That is so cool.
And she went on a Bible study binge where she joined 3 Bible studies.
Oh yeah, of course, you got to do that.
And at that point, I was. We could transition if you tell me to go into my career at that point. But we were broke. I think that was when I was in sales right out of college, selling photocopiers, I'm going to keep going. Can I go? Keep going,
Tell
Steve?
me more. This is great. I love this because brokenness is, by the way, is what we talk about. Not necessarily financial brokenness, but it ends up being sometimes more internal brokenness too.
Yeah. You saw my brokenness as realizing, because I was a good kid. I was, good kid. Yeah, I made good decisions. I wasn't into nasty things. Didn't break too many laws. But my brokenness was a realization of my need for a savior. But about the same time, I was selling photocopiers for A.B. Dick. Hi, I'm the A.B. Dick man. Don't buy that Xerox or IBM or Canon copy or something that you name you trust. Buy my A.B. Dick copier. I was terrible at it. Terrible at it. I'll always cherish the lessons and the tenacity that it taught me. But then I sold law books for a while, carrying a 24-pound briefcase around the city of Chicago. It was terrible. To corporate attorneys, I was out of my league there. I was terrible at that. And my faith was growing. I had 2 little boys at home. I need to backtrack 1 second. This is my brokenness from this is where I hit bottom, and this may be the best lesson. This is why anybody tuning in today needs to hear this. I will never forget sitting in our little in the winter, sitting my wife and my 2 little boys were sitting on a threadbare carpet. The wind was coming through the walls of our house. FHA mortgage. We were two months late. Rita was hiding bills from me because she knew that I'm a salesman, so I had to be positive going forth in my day. And she looked up at me. God bless her. It was inspired by God. She looked up and said, Jay, I don't have faith in you anymore. Which is, again, I was handsome back then. I was pretty sharp, but I was just not in a place where I needed to be career-wise. And we could talk about the idea that she shouldn't have faith in me anyways, but that's not the point here. The point was that husbands and wives have to trust and have faith in each other and such. But let's give her credit, because she didn't do this. She didn't take the 2 kids and go back to mom's house.
Right.
We were actually in a good place. We had a good faith community, a little core group of Christians at the Catholic Church. And I wrote those words on a 3x5 card. Jay, I don't have faith in you anymore. 3x5 post, pinned it on my desk, and we started talking. We started praying together. We started talking about true hopes and dreams and where our gifts lie. So we hit bottom. I hit bottom, and she wasn't on top of that pit looking down, yelling at me. She joined me in the pit.
Wow.
And that's what married couples have to do.
Yes.
They have to join each other in pay. You can, there's so many stories of married couples who they go through something and it just breaks them up.
Yes.
But it should bring it back together. I do marriage conferences. I lead marriage conferences, and let's say there's 50 couples there, 100 people. And I'll say, hey, how many of you have hit bottom in your marriage? And about half of them raise their hand and say, yeah, we hit bottom. And I say, ain't it great? Because once you do that, once you come together and hit bottom together and climb it, because it takes both of you helping each other, talking it through, praying it through. There you go. And shortly thereafter, we started praying together, and I realized my gifts were creativity, both that mix of creativity and writing and tenacity and common sense, and advertising always was in the back of my head. I put a book together, and that's another story about how prayer works. But you get the sense that I ended up on Michigan Avenue for a decade doing very fun stuff, advertising for I did TV spots for Corona beer and for Midway Airlines and for Kroger grocery store with John Moschita, the fast talker. We did something.
Oh yeah, was Frito-Lay's in there too or something?
For Frito-Lay, I led. I don't want to overstate, but I coordinated the team that named Sun Chips. So any Sun Chips fans there,
Oh yeah.
My name was it was an art director who came up with the name Sunships. Mine was Amber Waves. I want to call them Amber Waves, but that's another story altogether.
That's great. Well, so you had, I mean, that's a big transition from AB Dick to Michigan Avenue.
Well, that was back in the day before social media.
Yeah, of course.
Where you just wear out your shoe leather and you put a sample book together and you drop it off. I don't think that could work anymore the way I did it. I tell my kids to just go knock on some doors, and they go, "What? No way!"
Yeah, but you know what? Everything runs in cycles. I was in sales for most of my early career, and I understand it well. What you're talking about, technical sales, business to business. But I can honestly say now, let's say a handwritten note, I think is a lot more effective than an email, and maybe even showing up at somebody's office. Can you imagine that? A personal visit. Well, that might even make a difference. Nobody's used to that anymore.
Are there even receptionists?
I don't know. I guess.
But you remember the receptionist. If you're in business to business sales,
yep.
And there's a big long desk, and there's people walking through.
Yeah.
Now nobody even goes to. There's no offices anymore.
I know. That's a great point.
I sound like an old man, but
oh no. But so you did. You made a big transition there, and then what I love about your story, which I obviously know a lot about, but what our listeners, I want to hear from you. There's a shift there, right? Something happened where advertising or working in that kind of high profile arena, something changed. What was that? What happened?
Well, I may have got fired from
okay.
Which is another lesson about how God uses it all.
That's all I'm trying to say.
you hit the bottom, you hit bottom, and God will use that. So, but I needed to. A new creative director came in, executive creative director, and started cleaning house. Brought in his old people, and he let go of just a ton of people. So it wasn't like I wasn't pulling my weight. It's just like he wanted to start fresh.
Maybe the best thing that happened to you. Maybe
yes. And I ended up at a little. Well, I had at least a 2-hour commute every morning, back and forth. So 4 hours every day, and my family was growing. I got fired actually on my birthday, 2 days after my 4th son was born. So think about that for a second.
Nice.
Early 30s, let's say.
Yeah.
And mid 30s. And well, again, I ended up looking for ad agencies in the western suburbs so I could maybe shorten my commute, maybe mid-size agencies. And then I stumbled across this kind of Christian media agency, and I interviewed with them. And I was still Catholic at that time, but I'm giving credit for to Ed Elliott, who hired me at Domain Communications. And suddenly I was doing fundraising and producing radio. I was producing I produced Josh McDowell Radio. Many of your listeners know Josh McDowell, right. More Than a Carpenter, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, the Right from Wrong campaign, a lot of other things. And he's a good friend and has done endorsements and forwards for many of my books.
Yeah, I have one here in the recent one here. Actually, actually did one for What If God Wrote Your To-Do List, which I have here. Yeah, which was great.
But I was producing Josh McDowell. I had no idea who Josh McDowell was.
Oh, that's pretty funny. That's hilarious.
I had no idea how big a deal he was, because this was at his peak that they launched this radio program.
Sure.
I produced it. So about 3 times a year, I would go spend about 4 days with Josh, with Wayne Shepard and an engineer, either Dan Anderson or Tim Hollinger. And we would go and spend 4 days with him and record maybe 15 to 20 programs. And that's the same time when the Berlin Wall fell and Glasnost, and we went to Russia 4 times with Josh. I brought my son one time. What a privilege that was to see that. Sure. I handed copies of More Than a Carpenter. I could probably pull one off here in Russian. But More Than a Carpenter, Jesus Christus, and you give it to somebody. And I totally remember Moscow, gray and dirty, and this bus going by, but 2 babushka ladies holding up, reading More Than a Carpenter that I had just given them in a bus. So
that is awesome.
So real life stuff. Yeah. I mean, just mind blowing things, but real life stuff that seeing lives change, and my life's changed, and my kids' life changed. And I was Josh had just say wait to have sex again, whatever it was called. I don't remember it, but the wait till you get married campaign to have sex, and a lot of racial stuff. And that's when I was raising my kids. So think about the impact that had on me.
Sure.
Sure. And then the next big step for that was I ended up co-writing 4,000 short scripts, 4,000 scripts for Today's Father, for National Center for Fathering with Ken Canfield and such. So imagine that. So I'm yelling at my kids, get out of here, kids. I got a deadline. I'm writing the scripts for how to be a better dad. Get out of my office, you rotten kids. I love it.
4,000 of them, by the way.
Yeah, right. Well, over a few years.
Yeah, I guess it would have been over a few years. That is so good. And then you went on. You did some work with Chuck Colson's organization, right?
Well, again, I knew who Chuck Colson was, but
yes.
Project Angel Tree every year. I wrote and produced an hour-long radio special to raise funds for Angel Trees, which is giving gifts to the children of inmates,
yes,
from the inmate. And
very familiar, great program.
And recorded stories. And I would go and I track down and put a microphone in front of a little girl or a mom. Would go to some prisons and record some things, or ex-inmates. And we'd weep, and I would be editing these things, and I'd cry.
Oh my goodness!
It also taught me. I mean, fundraising. You got kids, you got Christmas, you got prisoners who are trying to be rehabilitated. You got Chuck Colson. That was a pretty easy ask. Yeah. I apologize to anybody who. And let me take 3 steps back and say, I have worked with some awesome ministries, from the Bible League to Voice of the Martyrs with Toby Mack and Michael Tate, and high integrity, cared about nickels, and aren't wasting your money. I just need to confirm that, because there's some perhaps some ministries that aren't so ethical. I don't even want to say that at all, except for, boy, I can just confirm that the guys I worked with, they are just solid, and they care. Didn't pay me enough, so they might.
That's always the case, isn't it?
All right, but point made. Point made. Yeah, there's some good folks out there still. Holy cow, yeah.
That is amazing. So I have this question for you. Since, as a producer, do you have a particular, what would be your most memorable moment in producing all those things? Does anything jump out at you?
Well, being at the prison fellowship offices and sitting across from Chuck Colson and saying, Chuck, I think you can do that over again. I think you could do that better. That's very funny. That's very amusing to me.
Yes.
And I'll tell this story, which, since he's passed, that's okay. He was doing something where he's saying blah, 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 blah on this radio station in this city, blah, 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 blah. So all we had him do was we had him record the whole spot, and then just we picked up and just did whatever the call letters in this city. So he did a list of maybe 80 of those, so that he didn't have to read the whole spot. We're just trying to be efficient with his time.
Perfect. Yeah, it's perfect.
Perfect. It makes great sense, and I'm listening to make sure that the tone is right. So, before he hung up, he didn't know we were still recording, and he said, "Oh man, that's mind-numbing." So I have Chuck Colson on tape saying, "Man, that's mind-numbing."
You could play that one over again a few times, use it for other spots.
That's right. That's true. A solid guy. And the other is the humble moment when you realize that there are people that you'll never meet on the other side of the planet reading a New Testament. Because you did something that some little blue-haired lady wrote her $7 check that sent 7 Bibles to some weird place that I will never be. What a privilege to be part of that. And we all have things like that in our lives, that you do something, you just never know. You just never know.
No. You don't.
Truly, what a humbling it is.
Humbling. I think it is good. That's a good way of putting it, because I often think about that. because, what we do, it's, we're writing, we're speaking, we're teaching, we're doing that. We don't always know, but this notion of sort of exponential growth in a message God's given us, for you, for me, for all of us, like, we don't know where it's going to land. And that's why, I know you've written almost 40 books, but I imagine there was a time early on when you said, I'd just be happy if one person bought it and it changed their life.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's my view of things like that. And the greatest part of that is someday in heaven, we have an eternity to hear from those people.
I think we do. That's kind of the concept. And one of my life verses that keeps rolling around, Isaiah 55:11. You send out his word, and it always produces fruit.
Right.
Now that's kind of mind blowing there. I mean, and I think of my 39 books or so, probably 2/3 of them have some version of the gospel. Some are subtle, some are hard hitting. Like, this is it. You gotta. This is it. And some are just a reminder that we need. Yeah.
We and
maybe more than that. Yeah.
We do, and I love that idea, because I focus on that more than worrying about numbers. I think at this point, just go back and look at Billy Graham's life, and you can say that only a couple people early on had some pretty significant influence on him that changed the course of history as an evangelist, right, in that time. Yeah. Even the recent story we saw in Jesus Revolution is more Greg Laurie's story of an evangelist who came out of a movement that was probably one of the greatest that we've ever seen in our lifetime, in terms of just almost internationally, the Jesus movement. And just one person, obedient. I knew Chuck Smith. I met him. There's another individual who just taught God's word relentlessly, never compromising. And this is all we do. This is what we do. We put it out there, and God changes lives. I just love that. It just takes the pressure off. Like, it doesn't really matter what we think.
Right. Oh, well, that's the other, whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. I'm paraphrasing there. Whatever's in front of you, just do it with excellence.
Yes.
And God will use it, even if it's not, giving someone a Bible tract. God will use it. Just if you're watching your neighbor's kid, do that with all your might. If you're washing somebody's car, do it with all your might. God uses that.
I'm sure there's some kids right now that you rocked and wrote and read to.
I haven't thought of that. Yeah, you're right.
Think about it. That there might have been a message in there somewhere. I'm sure there was, for somebody that they're going to look back in their life, because we have them, don't we? Those moments when some little thing that you think at the time is insignificant, and you go, "Oh my gosh!" I think back a coach in high school. Coach it was junior high. I was a football coach. I didn't play football beyond junior high. I was more basketball guy, but he just had such an impact on my life, because he was affirming in my identity. Like, the identity questions we talk about a lot around here, and brokenness comes from a lot of times the lies we believe about ourselves, things that are sown into us as youngsters, and by significant people. Could be our parents, could be coaches, could be anybody, right? They have a lot to say, and it sticks. So the positive messages are the ones that we want to reinforce. And identity is all about what God thinks of us, not what man thinks of us, right? And I know you have something that you're thinking about.
Oh, here it is.
Perfect. Go for it.
No. This is a story of D.L. Moody tells.
Yes.
That Henry Varley was a British revivalist, same time as D.L. Moody.
Okay.
And Varley said something to him. He said, Moody. This is Varley. He said, this is after the Chicago fire. So D.L. Moody goes to Britain while they're rebuilding Chicago. Whatever.
Yes.
And he says, Moody, the world has yet to see what God will do with a man fully connected to him. He's talking to his buddy, Moody. The world has yet to see what God will do with a man fully connected to him. And those words propelled Moody to greatness. Whatever.
Well, God's greatness. Yes, he sure did.
But here's the point of the story, is that years later, Moody goes back and says, Varley, I tell you, what you said, those words to me, it was inspiring. And Varley goes, well, I don't remember what I said. That's the point, is that we don't know what we're saying to somebody. a little moment of encouragement to your kid, to the neighbor kid. I have my third son is a teacher and a coach, and oh my golly, the parents, the parents who come to me and say, "Boy, your son Max, he really impacted my son's life." Now, I don't think it was a spiritual thing. It was just you matter, you're loved. Yeah. There's a plan for you, and you know, Max is out there. They know he's a church-going guy, but he doesn't preach. But he loves and shares and encourages.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Love passes in community. So God is love. It passes in community. If we believe him, and Max is clearly someone who accepts that, it's much more effective. You can pass it with the Spirit of love, right? So it shows up in a lot of ways. We don't have to speak the words. We don't have to preach the gospel. We don't have to, we don't have to hold up a sign in the end zone that says John 3:16, right?
Although you don't know, that might work too.
Well, trust me. I'm sure it did.
Yeah,
I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
I'm sure it did. I pass a guy. I live outside of Philadelphia here on the western part, just about an hour out in Lancaster. There's a guy that stands in the corner, man, in the square in Lancaster, and he just preaches with his signs. And I'm like, okay, that's not for me, because some of them are a little questionable as to what they're on the sign. I'm like, oh, okay. The old, fire and brimstone kind of process. I don't know. It's not my calling, but far be it from me to say otherwise, So I agree. And so you have shared a lot of truths over the years in those 39 books. By the way, I have a few of them here. So I'll just hold up the three that I can't. It's like I could have a deck of cards, but I'm going to just use these.
Excuse me.
So one of them is the 35 ways, speaking of love, right? To say I love you to your kids.
365, right.
360. Did I say 365? Correct. Every day of the year.
Yeah.
And sure. But I'm sure Max heard a few times. I love you this way. Here's one of my favorites. I'll let you comment because.
Oh, really? Oh, you're going to pull one out there?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to quote you in your book. I doubt you'll remember, but do you know what 239 is, by the way? All right, I won't do that. I won't do that to you. Open your high school yearbook on the kitchen table, and when they begin laughing at your hairstyle, or if you don't have any, I guess, pledge to laugh at their high school yearbook 20 years from now. And then you go on to say, admit that your high school hairstyle will be completely embarrassing today, and that it's a good thing that hair can grow out and restyle. And remind them that an embarrassing tattoo from someone's youth cannot be changed quite as easily. I love that because, I've seen my yearbook picture not that long ago. I'm like, holy cow, that's just crazy. But that is just an example of just interact, right? Be a piece, part of their life.
That idea of opening, pulling out your kids' high school yearbook.
Yeah.
Not yours. You can pull out yours and your kids will laugh at it. Or pull out. I wrote that in my book for grandparents. One of my more recent books, Hooray for Grandparents.
Yeah.
Pull out your adult children's high school yearbook. Just lay it on the kitchen table. Next time the 12-year-old kid comes over, your grandson comes over, and they'll open it up and look at mom and dad and say, "What is that? Look at that!" And then they'll say something like, "Wait a second." They'll start looking for the basketball team because Dad said he was in the basketball team. Dad's not on the basketball team. Dad, you said you played basketball in high school. What's going on here? So that's a conversation they'll take back. What a gift that is to your kids, so they can have a conversation with their kids. Or, hey, wait a second.
It is.
And then it's like, wait a second. Who wrote this? Why did LK puke on the way back from the homecoming game? That kind of thing. Or
it's so funny because it is the greatest part of our time with our kids is to be able to share those moments in conversation about how different life was in those times, right? Well, that was fun. Jay and I went on to talk quite a bit, and in fact, decided that we would make this a 2-part podcast. So I would encourage you to come back the next time and just join us. We get into some really interesting conversations about our faith, both of us, our journey, his journey as a writer, as a speaker, as someone who really has a sincere love for God. So please don't miss it. We have a lot to talk about on our next podcast with Jay Payleitner.
This was another episode of the Embracing Brokenness podcast. For more information on Embracing Brokenness Ministries, or to subscribe to our blog, podcast, YouTube channel, or engage with us on social media, please visit our website at embracingbrokenness.org. Thanks for joining us.